in 2018, it was 12% of German EMS companies who did more than 8% in net profit. The majority, yeah, there was even 16.9% in making losses, but the majority is running at 2, 3, 4%. And that is not a situation which we have on the European scale. If you look at the analysis on a global scale, you see that as well. The real big companies, most of the real big companies are making net profits which are below 3.4%.
You know, this is a good time to I wanted to kind of, especially in the interest of time here, I could talk to you for hours, by the way. It's, let's talk about kind of the future. And one of the things that you spoke about in a presentation, I recall, you made a forecast. I think maybe it's at Productronica last year. Anyway, you talked about EMS companies that you thought would be failing, going out of business. There was a certain percentage. And at the same time, you spoke about an increase in mergers and acquisition activity within Europe. How do you see both of those? Where's your opinion on those issues today?
Well, first of all, what I see, and that is not a problem of coronavirus, that was before coronavirus, that the margins are reducing, shrinking. We see a lot of activities in the on the distributor side. The distributors are merging and getting bigger and bigger, thus getting a higher sales power and making sure they get the price they are looking for. This increases the material cost for the EMS, and he on his side is not able to easily increase the prices to his customers.
Right.
So the margins go down, and for a small company this is hurting a lot, and they have to think of ways how to get out of it by either increasing manufacturing depths, like for example doing not only the PCBA but doing engineering, doing box building as well, if they have the capability, or and if they have the money to invest in those processes. Yeah. But if they are too small, they cannot. Yeah. And at the same time, if we look at all those companies, and there is a huge amount of companies, I think it's more than 1,600 EMS companies in Europe, which generate less than 10 million euros in annual revenues. Now, let's just assume we have an OEM who has to place an order for 5 million euros. And he wants to place it with one EMS. He's definitely not going to give this order to a company which makes only 10 million in revenues or less, because then there is much too high dependency. Yeah. So the small companies are more and more missing out on business, and they see this, and this is now accelerating with the coronavirus situation, as all of a sudden the demands are lower, and we even see a shift in demands. It's very interesting that the consumer spending behavior is changing. At least we see that in Europe. People are, or many people are reluctant to go on vacation, and they think, well, what are we going to do this year? Maybe we invest in a new heating system for our house, or in a new AIB system, in the bus system for our house. So we automate all of that. I have an EMS company who is focusing much of his business in pellet heating, wood pellet heatings. And he says, well, I wouldn't believe it, but the market is going crazy in this area, and I might see a pickup in revenues by 35% this year. for the simple reason that everybody is now investing in this area. The same goes for these consumer goods, but not the standard consumer goods, which are all manufactured in the Far East. No, with bus systems, yeah, with sensors and all of this. This is picking up, so that is good.
Yeah.
But
how do you see the impact on like the merger and acquisition activity within Europe?
Yeah. There is a lot of talking at the moment. I'm not too much involved in it, so right. As far as I know, the due diligence between USI and Estil is not closed as of now. Yeah. So I don't know. Are they still talking about the price? Yeah. Who knows?
But there has still been some activity during the Corona, wasn't it? Our colleague at Katec.
Well, yes. In actual fact, that was even before Katec. They bought, end of last year, they bought, or they didn't buy, what they did, they took the electronics department of a company that is strong in the locking systems for automotives. This company is called Hoof, and they were very strong in the mechanics, and they decided that in actual fact, as the locking systems had more and more electronics, they had a huge electronics department. But they realized that they were not the professionals to manufacture electronics, and so they got into discussions with Katec, and Katec took over the whole electronics factory in towns close to Düsseldorf. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But again, as automotive is not very strong at the moment, it's a pity. Yeah.
Right. You know, I like the analysis you do, and we'll show the slide here, of the revenue groups and the size of those, you know, the above, and you referenced some of that already here. You know, how is that how there's what, 5, or I forget how many you said that are over 5 billion? The size of the EMS companies, that it's really, you have some really big ones, and I think even in your survey you break them up into 4 revenue groups.
Yes.
The EMS. Yeah. And so how do you characterize kind of that structure within Europe?
Well, I think specifically the smaller ones, as they have more difficulties, they will either vanish, or they will have to look for mergers with an equal partner, or to be bought to form a bigger group. I don't know.
Right. Right.
So
that's happening here in the US as well.
Possibilities how to achieve that, but definitely one thing is for sure. 2,164 EMS companies in Europe is simply too much. Yeah. Simply too much, and we don't have enough niche where the small ones can hide. Competition is getting bigger, and I spoke about that last year at Productronica, and I said I'm expecting a paradigm change within the next 10 years, and up to 30% of companies, specifically smaller companies, will vanish. And I still believe that, and I still think that the coronavirus will now accelerate this situation. So people who think they can do business the same way in the next 10 years as they did in the last 20 years, they'll definitely fail. The market needs new ideas, new strategies, And there is probably, from what I talked with EMS companies, there's probably quite some interesting ideas on the market, but companies are reluctant at the moment to speak about details. But
of course, yeah.
I have my ear on the street anyhow to listen to what is going on.
Do most of the ones, when you're talking about the smaller ones, are most of their service offerings primarily printed circuit board assembly?
Yes, yes, okay. That is, yes, that's the situation. But see, you have other companies who might be focused on either just engineering, and others who might just be focused on box building, which at this moment of time are not part of my database, because my definition of my EMS database is if a company does not do PCB assembly work, it is not an EMS. Right. But that doesn't mean that there's a lot of engineering companies, number one. And we just saw that in April in Switzerland, Vario Systems, they bought an engineering company. So this engineering company is doing the work before it goes to the PCB manufacturer, and Vario Systems make sure that they then get the PCB assembly work, which is not too intelligent. It's logic, just logic. And at the same time, we have companies who do, for example, mechanical work, who are specialists in contract mechanical manufacturing. And if you have to do the box building as well, then, for example, you could combine those three companies together, get a much deeper manufacturing value chain, and thus form a bigger company that has less difficulties to survive in a difficult market. So, and then you see some people are able to concentrate on special things which not everybody likes. For example, if you look at Cordon Electronics, which is a French company, they are focusing on repairs only. And they do lots of repairs, and you wouldn't believe it. They are among the top 100 global EMS companies. They did 260 million euros last year, and they have, I think, 12 factories. They have 8 factories in France. They have 1 in Romania. They have 1 in Hungary. They have 1 in Madagascar, Africa, and they even have factories in the Caribbean, in Guadeloupe and Martinique, where others spend their vacation. And exactly. They have 1 in Mexico as well. So that's a typical niche, and it's not a small niche with 260 million. So there are several possibilities how to build a proper strategies that values from me. And if you remember the good old days, I think that was, I think 8 years ago, there was a company in Shenzhen. This company had 2 factories in Shenzhen doing EMS business, and as well they did liquid electronic displays. And they got some problem with the tax authorities. And they had this big advantage that their factories were in the middle of Shenzhen, where the real estate prices were exploding like hell. So what they finally did, they shut down the factories, they tore down the buildings, and they built modern apartment and office buildings on the sites. And today, this company is making much better profits than they did with the EMS industry. They changed from EMS to real estate. So don't be narrow-minded in your planning.
But that was Nam Tai, wasn't it? So I think...
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
Good memory.
In the interest of time, let's look at the future. I held you back before when you wanted to stop that. How do you see the industry in Europe playing out? You do some forecasts, and like all good forecasts, they're all wrong. But right,
Yeah.
the further out, the more questionable they become. The closer in, the more you can be. Obviously.
Two
How do you
things
see
about
it?
forecasting. If you do forecast something, first of all, you need to know the history and the development of history. If you don't know the past, how can you predict the future?
Right.
So, in my fifth survey related to coronavirus, I asked the people, those 27 companies, I asked them, how do you see your business developing in 2020 compared to 2019? And again, it was a mixed answer depending on the size of the company. The big companies with more than 50 million in revenues, they saw an average decline of 6 to 8%, but some, being heavily involved in the automotive industry, even said, no, it's 20%. Interestingly enough, the companies with 20 to 50 million, they had a much higher prediction. They said, no, we're going to only see maybe 4% decline. But I have to mention that when looking at the individual companies, I realized that in this question, this group was not necessarily representative. There were two companies in the group which were doing quite well within the crisis, and with a total of only 8 companies in that group, having 25% then saying, well, it's not all that bad, you cannot take this over to all of the companies. So the outcome for them was too good. But on the other hand, looking at the companies below 10 million, they all predicted in the average nearly 20% less. Now, then I have to take these results and multiply them with their revenues in order to get to a full picture.
Right.
This picture at the moment for Germany, Austria, and Switzerland stands at a minus of 9.6%. And I still believe it is too positive. I think we will see a decline of revenues between 10 and 14% in Western Europe. In Eastern Europe, the situation is different. Now, as we are all in home office and as we are communicating much different now as we did in the past, there is a big pickup in computer and communication electronics, and the last predictions I saw on a global scale, they said the business is going to increase by about 10%. Now, I was a little bit careful in regards to this happening in Europe as well. I just said, no, I think the companies in that area will have the same results as 2019, but they will have no reduction in their revenues. Now, if we look at the structure of the Eastern European countries, we have the big players like Foxconn, Wistron, Inventec, Jabil, Flex, and some others who are working in this area as well, who have low mix, high volume products from the so-called 3C industries: computers, communication, consumer products.
Right.
And in this area, and if you look at the revenues of these companies compared to the total revenues of Eastern Europe, these companies have 58% So these 58% I take at zero growth, which means zero decline as well.
Yeah.
But the others, I think, will have the same problems as Western Europe, which means 10 to 14%. For all of Eastern Europe, it means the average will be at 6% decline.
Mm-hmm.
And if the Western Europe in the average is 12% decline, then we'll see for all of Europe a decline of 9%. Now, the difficulty about such predictions or average numbers is you can drown in a river that is just 2 feet deep. If you happen to fall in this river at a place where it is 20 feet deep, yeah, so that doesn't mean that the prediction is wrong. Yeah, we just have to realize it totally depends on the size of the company, and it depends on which markets the company is serving. Yeah, because that is a huge impact, especially at this stage. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, just in closing, because I realize we're running. We were worried that we wouldn't fill a half hour. Look at this. So we got plenty. But you did an analysis too. So we're talking about revenue, but at the end of the day, it's not necessarily the top line; it's the bottom line that's most important for the viability of the industry. You've been doing some research and some work on that. How would you characterize that between even the large and the smaller companies? So,
well, I think everybody has realized now that revenues is not as important as profits. Now, it is not size that matters. It is technique, like in football. And if you read the latest announcement, which I read today from the new chairman of Foxconn, who has given out new predictions, you hear nothing about Apple, you hear nothing about Hewlett Packard, but you hear something about we're focusing on
AI,
medical electronics, and we are going to increase our gross margin from 6 to 10%. Hey, that is finally a good approach.
Yeah.
Don't think you need to be big. You need to be profitable. And if I today look at some of the annual reports still of some big EMS companies, I really get sick if I see that the first 100 pages in these reports focus on the bonus systems for the management only. And if I want to read something about the strategy of the company as a shareholder, I have to search, and I'm lucky if I find 1 or 1.5 pages. That to me is lousy management. Yeah? And that needs to stop.
Yeah.
We are not a money exchange company. We are there to make profits, and we are there to make reasonable profits, and everybody, even the customers, have to accept that.
Right, exactly. You know, it's interesting because if you look back at the history of EMS, and I'm dating myself here, some of the biggest deals back in the day were smaller companies acquiring larger ones, right? So you have the Flex bought Selectron, who was number one, right? And Sanmina bought SCI, who was number one.
Remember those days,
Remember those days, but that's because the bigger ones were so focused on just the top line revenue piece that it ultimately hurt them, right? And it made them, it was an attractive acquisition because of what they had. And somebody came in who was smaller, said, hey, we can do this better, right? And both of the companies, in this case, Sanmina and Flex, are still very much operating in the industry and quite successful these days. So. Anyway, listen, Dieter, we're going to have to end our time here, but we'll pick it up again in a couple of weeks, I'm sure. So, as always,
I think it's less than 2 weeks. No, it's 2 weeks about.
2 weeks from Wednesday. It's on July 15th.
Yeah.
But let me just say thank you also to our audience, those watching in4ma, IN4MA, Information for Manufacturing is what it stands for. This is Dieter Weiss. He is the brains and the personality behind it. I would encourage everybody to continue to track his work, as I think it is some of the most excellent work being done, not just in Europe, but in the EMS industry as a whole. So Dieter, as always, thank you very, very much for your time and your insights. And I look forward to speaking again soon.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric. It was always a pleasure. And now the weather being so nice outside, I think I might take a sunbath again.
There you go, sir. I wish you well.
Yes. Stay healthy. Wear a mask.
Yes, as we say in Texas, y'all be safe. In Germany, you say what? Bleib sicher, right? So,
yeah.